Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, whenever you happen to be listening. I have a very exciting episode coming up here. This is like just beyond for me. It's a little weird too. I thought interviewing myself was going to be an interesting process, but I think this one's going to be even more of a different experience than that. So, my guest today is someone who has known me my entire life and may or may not have been happy when I arrived on this planet. It may have taken us about 30 years to truly get used to one another and become friends, but I am beyond thrilled to welcome my sister Tina to the show today. So, welcome. How are you? I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm like weirdly nervous all of a sudden.
Hey, I'm a little nervous too. I don't get interviewed a lot, particularly by siblings.
This is going to be a little different for both of us. I was kind of inspired by my friend Louise, and I know I talk about Louise a lot. She's been on the show before, but she interviewed her sister, and I just thought it was such a fun and fresh episode, and just listening to the way that they had, built this friendship and sisterhood was exciting. And I think that you and we took a long time to get used to one another.
For sure.
But then it was like once we were able to really like interact like mature adults and sisters, like it was just like life changed for in our relationship completely. And it's so weird for me to think about growing up together but never really being that close, and now how close we are.
Well, I blame our brother because he was closer in age to you. So I was the outsider for, I don't know, most of it.
Yes.
But yeah, you're right, Olivia. It has been a long time. I remember even when we were in our 20s, we would scream at each other and we just couldn't get along. It's crazy.
We fought a lot at like every family gathering. And the thing is that we've always lived like far apart from each other. So it wasn't like we saw each other all the time, but the time together was always like, there was like something was going to hit the fan at some point. We just knew it was always going to happen. And I think I remember a situation, and I know that you remember, and I won't go into the specifics of it, but it was very dramatic. I was very upset.
Yeah.
And all I needed at that moment was support. And I feel like that was just a pivotal moment in our relationship, because you could have reacted to that situation in a million different ways. And all it was, this is crappy. We're here for you. You tell us what you need us to do. And I feel like everything shifted for us in that moment. You were exactly what I needed. I'm going to cry during this interview. Like there's no doubt about it. This is just, so I feel like, and I think the great thing is that when this shift took place, we didn't have to go back and relive our history. Where some people want to work through all of that stuff, it was just kind of like,
we hated each other and now we're good.
Yeah. So there were a few kids in our family. And I was thinking about this morning. I was like, we were kind of in pods. So we have an older half brother who grew up in a completely different household. And then there were three of us that were born fairly close together. And then years later, two more sisters came along. And so just very different upbringings, and just even the family dynamic and situation was very different in each one of those little sections of, so it's just been, we've had an interesting life. But before we dig into that, you've built this amazing career. You've lived in some amazing and beautiful and fascinating places. I've been lucky enough to visit one such place, do some shopping, do some fun things, and be a good tourist with a good, amazing, wonderful tour guide. And you have two wonderful kids who I get to call niece and nephew, and a wonderful husband. So like how have you guys been navigating this whole quarantine situation?
So a lot of it has been it's been flexibility. So, it goes in spurts, right? We'll get on each other's nerves and we don't want to talk to each other and we're all fighting in the house. And then, the next day we're like, hey, let's go out and, let's go find a hike or something to do. Or, hey, let's go watch a movie. So like a lot of it is just everybody's going to have a hard time, and you just have to accept it. You're going to come out of it, and you have to be resilient. And being resilient, I mean, that's something we talk about with our kids a lot,
Yeah.
because we move so much and because they are constantly exposed to new cultures and new places. We talk about, everything's not going to be the same every day, but what is the same is our family. We're a core group right here. And now, we've got the little cat, and that was the other thing that got us to the quarantine. He's adorable. We got him, he was 3 months old, and he made every day of quarantine so much more bearable because there was some other thing that needed our attention. So we all had to help. And that has been probably the biggest thing. We also have a really great set of neighbors. And that is something I don't think we find a lot in our culture anymore. You don't necessarily know your neighbors well.
Yeah.
And that's really a shame. I remember when we were growing up and we lived on a street for probably 15 years, right? We knew everybody when we first moved in. We played with all the kids. Mom would call and say, "Hey, are Tina and Olivia over at your house?" And Peggy's mom would be like, "Oh yeah, they're up here," whatever, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have that. When we've lived in DC, and we were in a townhouse community, and we knew nobody.
Yeah.
And there's 100 houses. Like, how do we not know anybody? And then, so when we move into these smaller communities, we end up knowing our neighbors very well.
Yeah.
And that, it really does take a village.
It does. Like, that sense of community is like so important. And I think, like, as we have gone into this lockdown phase in our lives, having to like think about losing that sense of community has been
Yeah.
tremendous. I mean, that's where you really, for me, that's where you kind of start to like lose it and feel like
Yeah.
you have no human interaction, and you almost forget what it's like to be human with other people.
Yeah. I mean, it was really touching in the middle of the pandemic when in Italy they were sorry, they were all on their balconies playing music together.
Mhm.
Or was it Spain? I think it was Italy. And it was a beautiful picture of community in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of just absolute nothing. Nothing was normal. Nothing was going well. But they were making music. They didn't even know each other, and they're making music on balconies together. And that was an amazing picture to me.
Yeah. And when you say that, I think about the fact that this whole pandemic is super polarizing, right? Like, everybody has an opinion. People disagree on all points of this and how it's handled, and what's the right thing to do, and is it real? And I think regardless of all of that, like, it's that stuff's somewhat important. Making sure people stay healthy, obviously important, but then making sure that we're taking care of everything else. Like, it's I think there's a lot of distractions in terms of, if you want to get wrapped up in the politics of it, I totally get that, and you can do that. But also there is like that home base feeling, and like making sure that you're protecting your personal well-being and the well-being of people that you love the most. And if you're so caught up in pushing opinions out there, you're maybe pulling attention away from the people in your life that really need you, or your own mental well-being.
And you're doing a fair bit of pushing as well, I think. And the more politically divided we get, I think the more we push ourselves away from each other. And we have to remember that, the United States is not built on one person. It's a community. And it has always been. And the sooner we can get back to feeling like a community and like a family and like a group united for whatever cause, I think we'll be better off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just, I could not agree more. I think, and it's funny because I did move in the middle of all of this, and I do live in a townhouse complex, and I really know one neighbor, but I have a very outgoing 7-year-old daughter who just goes and introduces herself to everybody. So she knows every pet that lives in this complex. She can
Aw.
name every dog and every cat. And she befriends these people, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. Like, she's totally fine." The dogs love when she like come, because apparently like one section of our townhouse has like dog parkish type stuff.
Oh, cool.
But she knows Like that's her nature. That's her way of coping. And while I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird because I was a very shy and quiet child, it makes me uncomfortable that she does this. But she, like, it's very comforting for her. So we do have one sister that's a vet. Maybe we'll have. I think we're going to have a couple more vets that follow on behind her.
Well, I'm pretty sure. I think both your daughter and mine are shooting for that veterinarian world.
Yeah.
They're just, they're obsessed. They're magnetized by animals. And it's kind of fun. It's
Yeah.
very fun to watch.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I want to talk about. Like this is like
Okay.
this is hard for me. I'm like, what should we talk about next? So let's gosh, I want to talk about your work a little bit, what you can talk about in reference to that. But and then like the other projects that you're part of. So
Okay.
I feel like I should tell people I remember like when you went to college and that, I mean, even though we didn't always get along, there were a couple times that you let me stay in your dorm, and I felt like
Yes.
the coolest person in the world. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go stay in my sister's dorm this weekend. And I thought I was just like, this is how I'm gonna rise to superstardom. I went to your frosh mixer.
Yeah. Good. It was pretty funny.
Like that was my cool status. That was I didn't need anything else the rest of my high school career.
You're like, I go hang out with the college people.
Yeah.
I remember those visits, and those were always like, we would fight at the end of them every single time, but we always had fun in the middle,
Yeah.
right?
Glad I'm
I
out of
was
here.
like, I can't wait till my sister gets here, and then there would just be, I don't know, something. It didn't matter. It was something little usually because that's how we fought.
Yeah.
But there was always this amount of like, my sister's here. I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. And we'd go and do stupid things. We'd go dancing at the club and then we'd go, I don't know, show you around campus, take you to all the union and everything. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
I just remember like eating as much food because there was like cafeteria was like exciting for me. It's so
Yeah.
weird. I'm like, gosh, now I would never go into a school cafeteria. I'd be like, no, 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 no. I'm not eating that stuff. But back then it was the ticket. Like that's all I cared about. But yeah. So you've always been and I know you don't like it when I describe you this way, but like you're one of the smartest people that I know. Like you're in my head, you're like genius status. Like I don't even understand if you tried to explain the details of your job, it would be like way over my head. Um, and so like our skill sets are completely different in life. Like
For
I don't
sure.
know that there's two people that are more different in this world than you and me. But it may have been part of our conflict as kids. I don't know.
It could have been.
But you've always been very driven, and I've always admired that. And you tackle so much all the time. So, and I know we talked before we like formally hit record, we talked about that super mom status, but so just
Yeah.
kind of like whatever you can share, like go ahead and like tell us about what it
Okay.
is that you do and then your other passion projects that you have going.
Okay. So I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer by education, not by trade. I'll make that clear. So while I graduated from electrical engineering at Iowa State, I kind of went, I don't know if I want to sit in a lab my entire life. So when I was going through all the career fairs, I was like, what else can I do? And of course, like it's right after 9/11. It was a month after 9/11, the career fair
Wow.
happened. So I'm kind of like looking around, going, okay, what can I do here? And there's all these government agencies. Every single one of them's there. I can go work for the government. All the military's there. I can go work at the military. Oh, look, Lockheed and Boeing, they're always big. So I was like, I just want something stable and I want something exciting. And so one agency popped out and said, what do you think it would be like to travel the world? Are you interested in living overseas? And I was like, sure, why not? So I got sucked into this job kind of by accident. I say sucked in and by accident, but it was really, I think it was destined to be this way. I
Mm-hmm.
think this is the perfect fit for my personality because it allows me to be a little bit technical, but a little bit creative and a little bit more of a manager. When I started out, it was an incredibly technical career. I was basically your entry level to mid level technician. I was fixing things at the, mechanical, the board level. I was, constantly in ceilings and getting dirty, and I loved every minute of it because I'm a hands-on person, right? I'm always manipulating something. Um, and then as I got more into the leadership role and the management role, it got a little harder.
Yeah.
Because I'd really never thought about being a leader. I'd never thought about being in charge of people. I mean, obviously, I was the oldest child, so I was in charge of all of you, but you know, that doesn't hold. Half the time you wouldn't listen to me. But I never really thought about what that meant in my life and what that meant in my career. So there was a very long learning curve, about 6 or 7 years, where I really struggled with how do I go from, I can set my own goals and I can do my own thing. How do I now lead other people through these goals? How do I convince others to follow me? And that was not something that my organization was really pushing me towards either. They don't have like a handbook of here's how like the military, they teach you from the day you walk into boot camp to the end of your career how to be a leader every single day. Not everybody does that well.
Right.
Or at all. So it was a struggle. And I didn't know the right people to ask. I didn't know the right questions to ask. So then I found myself one day changing jobs, which I do every 2 to 3 years. I change positions, get a new job description, a new group of people to work with, sometimes a new country. And I looked around and I have 150 contractors working for me. And they're all looking at me saying, what next, boss? What next? And I'm like, okay, so my last job was recruiting. I am not prepared for 150 of you to come ask me what to do every day. First of all, what do we do here? I mean, I sort of know, but it was a new position. It was in a new group. I had no idea what I was doing. And they're like, oh, by the way, you have a couple networks? And I was like, wait, I'm an electrical engineer. I don't do network stuff. But I learned. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from that is that you will always have experts in your team. You have to find them and rely on them. Even if they're not somebody that people would rely on, you find those people and they'll stand behind you. If you support your office, your team, they'll always come back and support you at the end. And it is really, I mean, that job almost killed me in so many ways. I was in conflict with a lot of people over what I wanted to do and what I thought was best because of my training. And it was a horrible position, but it taught me so much about leadership and about trust, which I have trust issues. We'll just admit that now. We can talk about our childhood if we want to, but so it was a really eye-opening experience. And then juggling so many things. I mean, there wasn't a day to go by that I didn't have 5 or 6 projects I was trying to juggle at the same time. So it has been really, and then, but it was a great experience, and it taught me that leadership is not a single facet. There are so many things that go into it, and that's a hard realization, because you think leadership is just assigning things to people and they'll do it, right? A good leader listens to their people. And, it's all of these facets. It's everything. Yeah. There's emotional intelligence that gets involved. There's a lot of organizational skills, like executive function that gets involved, which, engineers aren't necessarily known for some of these things, right? An engineer, we're not people, right? We don't put ourselves out there. We don't necessarily have a lot of skill working with other people. We want to go in our lab, do our thing, zap ourselves with a battery or whatever, so it gets hard. And engineers don't compromise either, because every engineer thinks that they are right.
Yeah.
So when you get a group of, I don't know, we had 6 or 7 of them in a room one day, we couldn't even agree on the name of the project because we all wanted it to be our name. It was horrible. Oh my God. So, it is a very interesting role to be in, to be an engineer and a manager. I think most firms out there don't have engineers in the management department. I think they get managers to go do it, be engineering managers.
Yeah.
It's a whole different specialty because some of the things just don't translate well. Yeah. So, and then coming here was a whole different experience. And being in this job, I have a much smaller group, but they aren't all Americans. So there's a cultural gap. Mm-hmm. There's a sociological gap. And that's just yet another challenge that we go through. And then, of course, we had COVID. So that just threw everything out of proportion. It's just been crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Life is disproportionate
right?
for sure.
Right? Used to think it was so easy, right? For the first 14 years of my career, I was like, man, I can do this all the rest of my life. The last 5 have been like, holy crap, really? So yeah, I mean, it's good. One of my favorite projects I'm working on right now is a mentoring program. I'm trying to figure out, so we tend to lose quite a few. And I know a lot of companies, it's a company thing. It's a, it's really a social thing at this point in the universe. We tend to lose about 30% of our new hires because they don't know what they're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and we aren't helping them find what they're looking for. And I know, like, I've read a lot of things from like Financial Times and some of the other big news magazines saying that mentoring is the most important thing you can do for a new hire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've been really passionate about that since basically the day I came in. And I had some really amazing mentors that led me here to where I am. And I feel like that it's time, while I don't consider myself a mentor, it is time for me to figure out how to make sure the mentors can get out there and meet mentees and what that relationship should be like and what we have as senior leaders to pass on to our junior troops. And it's hard. It's hard. We're all scattered. Like the whole conversation is like, well, we should do this. Oh, you know what? That'd be great, but we should also concentrate on this. And we're all over the place because there's so many things to know.
Yeah.
And then trying to divide up how that gets from A to B to C, it's hard.
But
It's really hard.
it's a worthy process. And I had a conversation with another person in the insurance industry, and we connected with somebody else, but like trying to build that mentorship program and really have like, it's like, I'm, for lack of a better term, I think we referred to it as like matchmaking. But really making sure that the program,
Yes.
because you could be like, oh yeah, like this is what they want to do, and this person is doing that job, and like all the credentials seem to make sense, and then you put the two people together, and it's like,
Okay, so
personalities are
each
not
other.
mixing here. Like this is not actually going to work for these two to be mentoring.
Yeah.
So there is like so many
Yeah,
different.
and we worry about that a bit too.
Yeah.
Because, you're always going to have those strong personalities that don't always get along with everybody and always they they're going to push.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they're on the mentor or mentee side, it's hard to get those balanced out with a personality that can accept that kind of push.
Mm-hmm.
um, it is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things that if we don't have it, we'll never be successful as an organization.
Right. Yeah.
So that is my current passion at work.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, every we talk about in the insurance industry. Obviously, you're in a completely different industry, but like we're facing a talent crisis. Like being able to recruit and maintain good talent in whatever job it is. The retirement wave is huge,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be able to backfill all of those positions. Otherwise, it's like, what does stop functioning? Or are we heading for even bigger burnout than
Right.
we've already suffered from? Because I don't think there's a single industry that hasn't struggled with employee burnout,
Right. That's a
especially now.
big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you really have to take care of your employees. And I'm not saying go the Google route. That's awesome. I really want to be able to take naps at work. But it is somewhat unrealistic for a lot of industries. Google has enough employees that they can do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
A smaller company isn't going to have those resources. And they need the same talent. They need the same level of talent, but how do you attract it? And how do you keep people working in a job for more than 5 to 7 years?
Mm-hmm.
That I see as a big thing in the States right now. I don't know if it's worldwide. I haven't really checked here, but it seems like 5 to 7 years is about the average that a person, they're like, once they reach that 5 year point, they start making a decision whether or not they're going to leave and go find
Yeah.
something else to do.
I think it
And
might
that's
be,
a scary thought.
I think it might even be shorter.
It could be
So
shorter, 2 to 3. I don't know.
I'm just curious from what you were mentioning before. So obviously, like engineers, very much like black and white defined terms. Is that a fair statement?
Yes,
And like
that's pretty fair.
I always say like life's in the gray. I'm smushy. Like I am super smushy, which is like it just is difference with us. But do you know your Enneagram number?
I think it's 6.
Okay. Now I
I
have to
think so.
I'm gonna have to study you because I should know all of these if I'm gonna ask the question. But I'm a two.
Right?
I'm like a
Oh, yeah, we're like on the opposite end of the spectrum here.
like a mushy little two. Like that's just that. And I think that like the math and science, like anything that was like very like black and white reasoning for me, like just never. My
I
brain
loved it.
cannot.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like I love data. Like if people want to talk about data all day long, like I'm just gonna like.
Ooh.
I love that kind of stuff, but I don't even know where that falls into the whole spectrum of math
But
and
that's
stuff.
different. I think that's more in the analytics side, not in the forming a solution. So I think what it is engineers like to take steps towards a solution.
Yeah,
That's like they have to have a path that goes somewhere.
it's
Whereas everybody else kind of like, like we go over here a little bit, we can jig over here a little bit, and I'll come to a solution, but it's just not going to be like the shortest direction.
right. It's not going to be
And
linear
so
by any means.
as a whole, the people who make up the engineering world probably are more geared towards I got to get there as fast as I can in the shortest time possible with no detours.
Yeah.
Dan, my husband, drives like that. I pretty much do everything else like that.
Yes, he does. If you ever want to have the most interesting driving experience of your life, you
It
should
tends to be rather horrifying.
get in a car with him. But I mean, I've always safely made it to my destination. It is defense.
Right.
And
Yeah,
if
he
we
has an
were ever
excellent
if we
references.
were ever going to the same place, like in separate vehicles, I don't think I've ever beat him anywhere. Like we
No,
could be
you
leaving
won't.
and heading to the same destination, and I could even think I know a shortcut, but my I'm like, how did you get?
He
We've
hits.
been here for 10 minutes. That's even
Where have
short.
you been? I know the last time that we drove out to Happy Joe's, we were like, wait, what? How on earth did he get here first? He left after we did, and he had my mother in the car.
Well, hopefully she enjoyed.
Well, not tight.
Yeah, feel like this is the most exciting drive you're ever going to take in Dubuque because, mm, fun
Right?
fact, I live walking distance from Happy Joe's, so
No way. That's awesome.
that's which is oh my gosh, that just takes me back. Oh wow.
Right?
Yes. So let's see here. What else do we want to dig into? So, I want to talk about our upbringing a little bit, and I'm teetering on the edge of how much we talk about, but it is, I think it's interesting to look at you and I, how different we are. Our lives are
And
completely
then
different.
the other 3, all different.
Yes, we're all
All
we're
5 of us
all
are so different.
so very different. All raised in the same house. Almost like a generation gap, I feel like, between
Yeah.
two sets of the kids. There's like a giant divide there. But wow, our experiences and the things that we've had to deal with afterwards have been different. And like growing up, I was dealing with my own issues. You were being treated differently. I just really I didn't see it. As
Right.
kids, obviously you're very focused on what's happening to you. I wasn't aware of my surroundings. I was maybe somewhat aware of it, but it was also very easy to just block it out and focus on what was happening to me. Um,
Right.
but what like one of the things that I like to talk about is like one of the biggest lessons from life and advice that you would go back and give your younger self, which I think could be actually very this is a hard question. Like it does make me emotionally, like this is hard for me right now. But we
Mhm.
we went through a lot of mental and emotional and verbal abuse as kids. Um, and
We did.
yeah, and we've had to heal in different ways. The hangups that we have as a result, very different, I would say. But based
Right.
on those experiences, and I think it's part of your drive that you
Mm,
have,
yeah.
but if you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice, like maybe even like the 10-year-old you that's in the middle of all of that, like, is there anything that you can think of that you would say to her?
So I honestly had a lot of issues with being confident in myself. And I know you did too, but mine I think was very different. Like I knew I had the ability, but I felt that if I showed how good I was, the other kids would not like me. So I would hide, my ability to ace math from other kids. I'd kind of play off dumb a little bit. And I think I would tell my 10-year-old self or my 12-year-old self, look, you know what? Nerds are going to rule the world. It's just how it works, right? Look at Elon Musk right now. The guy's a big nerd, and he's got everybody like just waiting with bated breath for his next cool invention. They really do. I mean, we wouldn't have. It's a confidence thing, but it's also like I feel like now that I hid so much of who I was when I was a kid because I wanted to be like everybody else, and there was no way. I mean, we grew up. We were the only half Asian kids in town.
Mm-hmm.
We were different from the day we moved into the city. There was no way I was going to be like the other kids in the class, and they were never going to accept that. And it's hard when you're 12 to look at that, and much easier when you're 40 to be like, those kids were stupid. It's just kids are dumb. They're mean. These kids knew each other since they were born, and I didn't. I didn't fit in, and it's hard to accept that. And at the same time, it made me who I was, but not in the best way. I got a little too defensive. I always had a big wall around me that people couldn't come through. I've only had maybe, 5 really good friends in my entire life. And that's part of it's my personality, and part of it is the way that whole childhood played out. And then, there was the other half of it where if I went out of the house to go see anybody, it was like a 40 questions before I could walk out the door. Well, who are you going to see? What are you going to do? Is their parents going to be there? Blah, 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 blah. I don't think you should go see them. Okay. Gosh. I remember prom. Trying to go to prom was like, I barely got there. I don't know how I got there, but I barely got there. It was crazy.
Yeah, I don't, and some of it was different when I was, you broke enough rules that some of them had lightened a little bit for me. But it's so funny because like we experienced a lot of the same things, a lot of the same things were said to us that were just so hard and impactful in like the worst way possible. But like for me, it wasn't like I didn't put up barriers. I just was like wide open trying to like pull any love into my sphere that I possibly could. And like that has been something that has just now been with me my entire life. Like and in some ways it's good, but in other ways I never figured out healthy boundaries.
Right.
And so learning that in my 30s is interesting. Recognizing other people's boundaries, because I was not good about that either. Like I was not perceptive of I was intuitive to a certain extent, but then I was always like, well, something happened and I'm going to get through to that person. Some people, they're not ready for that. Or I'm not the right person to do that. And so like getting a better global awareness of how my childhood has carried into my adulthood has been such a crazy process for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been for me as well. So, my insatiable drive to be the best at everything is part of what I came out of childhood. There were times when dad would look at us and be like, you can't count on a man to support you your entire life. Yeah. And, for that reason, here I am, I'm an engineer. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that made sense. I wasn't a doctor though. I was very disappointing.
I'm supposed to be a pharmacist.
Right? I was like, that I throw up at the sight of blood, right? So doctor's probably not a good thing for me.
Oh, that I don't understand
chemistry again. Thank you. Right. So that's not going to happen. And I went into full-on rebellion. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a big fight in our house over me going to Berkeley. I wanted to go to Berkeley and be a journalist.
What? No, 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 no. What? Journal?
I sent an application and got accepted, and I wanted to be a journalist.
Tina, this is a crazy revelation because I literally, no, like, I guarantee I can find the text message to my boss where I said I wanted to be a journalist. That's what I wanted to do. But I was like, how am I going to become a journalist? Honestly, like graduating from high school was like, I don't even know how to become a journalist. And I just,
Yep.
obviously, I didn't make it too far through college. But I wanted to be a journalist. I just said this to our other sister, Tammy, a couple of weeks ago. Like,
So funny.
maybe someday my second career will be as a journalist. Like, that's so, what? This is
That would have been my first career.
This is so weird for me that we wanted to do the same thing. I didn't want to go to Berkeley though. Like Berkeley doesn't even like enter my
It was all the way across the country. I figured it was a safe place to go.
yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So
Just get away.
that's what 18-year-old you want or 17-year-old you wanted to be a journalist.
Yeah. Crazy, huh? Because now I don't think I can I don't think I could write a news article to save my life at this point in my life. But yeah. I
And
mean,
all I do is write. That's why I feel like maybe this is coming back to
like yeah, you just slide back into that world. Yeah. Yeah. And I think about 22, I thought I would go into international law.
wow.
Yep. Then I didn't.
That's these
Joyful.
are these are all I was told I was going to learn new things about you. I wasn't quite expecting this.
You're like, oh, be careful what comes out of your sister's mouth. You may not want to hear any of this.
No, not that.
Yeah, I really struggled with trying to figure out where I wanted to go with life. And really, even 10 years into this career, I had to look at myself and make a decision on whether I wanted to stay here and do this. And, the end result was a resounding yes, I'm still enjoying this. It's really still a really fulfilling career. But there's, what do I do when I'm done with this? Because I really only have somewhere between um, 7 and 10 years left.
I got a few more than that.
So yeah, but that's I'll have to retire. I'll be forced to retire sometime in that time frame, and so I don't even know what. After my last position, I kind of got a itch to do cybersecurity, which is a huge field that doesn't have a lot of women in it.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, I like the challenge, so
Yeah.
so I'm looking into that as something to do as a post government career. Um,
Well, I have a great connection for you, so don't let me tell you that later. That's so weird. I literally just had this conversation with somebody last Friday. So, um, yeah, that's crazy. This is like the most bizarre full circle conversation. But speaking of, you know, being a female in leadership, wanting those challenges, it can be a very intimidating process for women in any industry. And
yeah,
how do we kind of bridge that gap? How do we get women over that hump, taking that next step in their careers? I mean, I think if you're driven, you're probably going to go for it. If you're reluctant, you might play small. And how do
yeah.
we kind of merge those two worlds together?
So it's interesting that you would ask that. I have another female engineer who works for me, and she has this great. She's always like hashtag lady boss, and she just makes this into this completely uplifting thing. And she's like, it's so inspiring because I'm 7-8 years ahead of her in my career, and she's like, it's inspiring to see somebody who can find a balance. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that women are forced to juggle more things historically. If you're going to go and run into a career, you're still trying to manage kids at home.
Yep.
You're trying to, you still have to figure out how to get dinner on the table. You're usually the one picking up the dry cleaning. Forgive me, men out there. I realize you do this sometimes as well, but for the most part, and bosses have that same perception that you as a woman are doing all of these other things and your focus is not necessarily always on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And you come across this in a lot of literature. I mean, it's all over, every business Insider, every, Forbes, all of them, they talk about this perception that women always have something else on their plate that's less important or that's more important than their jobs. And that's not always true. I
Yeah.
mean, men also want to be with their children. They also want to be part of the house. They aren't just focused on their careers. A lot of them will end up being workaholics, but a lot of women end up being workaholics. I'm
Mhm.
probably a workaholic. I try to hide it a lot, but it's, we have to balance that out. We have to understand that the job is not everything. When corporations push their employees to burnout, they're going to lose more of the women than they will of the men.
Mhm.
It's kind of I think women just like, they're like, fine, I'll go do something else. Or I don't know if they just get more frustrated or what it is, but I know in our organization especially, we tend to see a lot more of well, we have less women, so I guess it feels like it's just a lot more of them because there's so many of them. um, there's, it's like a 10%. We have 30% that leave every year, and 10% of them tend to be women. And that seems like some of it is, sometimes this job isn't the right fit for you.
Yeah.
But some of it is just the way we lead. Um, and it's hard. One of the things that happened to me when I was very, very new to this job was that two of the most senior women in my organization made contact with me and said, "Hey, you're going to need to know a few things if you're going to if you're going to make this long term. And let me tell you, the first thing you need to know is just to stand up. Just stand up. They'll hear you. They're not Neanderthals. They'll hear you, but you have to be there. You have to be present. You can't hide in the background." And the other thing to know is family always comes first, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what crisis you're going through. Your family is your most important thing. And they tell the guys that, but they don't always tell everybody that. And I was like, I don't have a family. I have a husband and a cat. I mean, I guess someday I'll have kids. And I have two now. And I can tell you, like, there have been points where I have walked away from my job and said, look, I can't deal with this right now. I got to go take care of my kids.
Mhm.
And everybody respects it. And that's a cultural shift, I think, that has happened in the last 20 years. Because I know, listening to some of my senior leaders, my senior female leaders, they have said that was not like that when they were young. So that makes me hopeful that we're making the strides that we need to.
Yeah. Well, and you look at just how other countries view work and family. And I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of valuable lessons out there. Um, and a lot of what I've been reading lately there's been this discussion about how the pandemic has impacted females and their careers, and how a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them have either abandoned their careers or had to take a step back, take
Yeah.
demotions and things like that, and how this has impacted the female professional much more than it has negatively impacted the female professional a lot more than uh,
Right.
their male counterparts. And it's a little heartbreaking for me. I mean, I've been very, very lucky and very blessed to have people behind me that are helping me figure it out. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that everybody's being
Not all of
extended those
them.
same privileges.
Yeah. I know we have a couple ladies that work near me who have had to kind of step back from being in their families, part of their families, to take care of the work things. And I think it hurts them more than, like, my husband's like, I gotta go to work again. Oh well, kids will be fine. They'll figure out their work. And I'm like obsessing over it because, again, very driven, have to have perfection. And I'm like, no, they didn't get their Spanish done on time. I'm going to make them sit here until 10 o'clock at night to finish it. And I think that's the difference. I think some of it is personality based, but some of it is like, I think, I don't know. I feel like with these two women in particular, their bosses just feel like, oh, you know what? Their kids are older. It's fine. We can just have them in the office all the time. And they have stay-at-home husbands anyway. And I was like, wait, I feel like this is a reverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, how did we come full circle on this one?
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wanted
Crazy.
it to go like this. We wanted to figure
We
out.
just wanted somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
There's a middle. There's a happy medium.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't know, but I also see the men having to deal with this too. There's a couple of guys on my block that have barely seen their families because they're on calls all day long, because all of a sudden we all have to be on these calls all the time. Somebody magically figured out that just a phone call or some emails, with this Zoom thing, this WebEx, of course we can just talk at 4 o'clock in the afternoon all the way until 9:30 at night. We
Ooh,
should have these 4-hour meetings every day.
ooh,
I was like, ugh, so this is how we're conducting business in the pandemic and
yeah,
post-pandemic is now, your work doesn't leave when you step out of the office anymore.
right.
That's what I think scares me more than anything, is that now my work follows me home. It's in my house constantly.
Hmm.
I was never made for telework because I don't find that boundary, you
Yeah.
know? Like, I don't walk out of my office and go, oh, I'm ready to join the real world again. People have to drag me out kicking and screaming on Friday afternoons. It's really sad.
Well, and that's a struggle that I've always had. Like, I've never had that magic line. And I talked about this in a video, again, bringing up Louise, but like this whole wheel, because all of just like getting everything rounded out, all of the things that need to be part of our lives and making sure that they're getting appropriate attention and priority is something that I've always struggled with. And part of it being that I did, as much as I love community and relying on people for a certain level of support, I also do feel a very strong need to be self-supported. Like, I want to be
You gotta be
independent.
super mom.
I want to be able to take care of myself. Yeah, we grew up with one parent that didn't know how to do that, and so
Yeah.
it has stuck with me forever. But maybe there have been times when I have been far too driven, and if I could work 24 hours a day and just take an occasional break to like hug a kid or throw mac and cheese in the microwave, like I was going to call that good enough. And not
Yeah.
realizing that I was missing out on some of the most amazing things in my life. And I'm reminded all the time as new people come into my life, as I sit there and I actually make dinner for my kids and I enjoy my weekends and people notice that I'm lighter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, maybe I am getting the hang of this,
Yeah.
but you have to have people that force you to look at it.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's
My
not
neighbor
always
comes
your,
over and knocks on my window. She's like, hey, it's time. Come on, let's go.
yeah, I do.
It's 1 o'clock.
Is it's 1 o'clock for you. It is not 1 o'clock for me.
Not yet, almost.
I'm not sure
With my
what,
shortly.
not sure what time is acceptable here, but
I don't know. I don't
supposedly
know. I will tell you, there was probably at
imperfect.
least a time or two that 1 o'clock came a little bit early during the pandemic,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
I
I
get
mean, we also had couple very long Saturdays. But I mean, what else do? You can't leave your house.
yeah.
And for us, it's, our neighborhood. We don't leave our neighborhood. So it was, but, again, a lot of it goes back to community. A lot of
Mhm.
it goes back to standing up, knowing what you need, um,
And saying it.
and saying it, which, I think you and I both struggled with as
Mhm.
kids, is not knowing the right things to say, hey, this is not right. I don't feel good. Um,
Right.
this
We didn't
hurts.
have we didn't have that language, and so it's interesting now raising kids, and we talked about emotional intelligence before, but raising kids that are emotionally aware and like letting them know that their emotions are okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it's a real struggle.
yeah. So one day, Karis asked me, she said, what if you were 7 during the pandemic? Like, what if this had happened when you were 7? And I was like, well, I don't know. Your mom was kind of a rule follower, so I'd probably just follow all the rules. I thought she was asking me about like wearing a mask somewhere. I wasn't really sure where she
Yeah.
was going. And she goes, would you be mad? And I was like, oh, honey, if you're upset about this, you have every right to be upset about it.
Right.
Just helping her find that language and give her that permission to explore the feelings that she was,
Right.
encountering at that moment. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a call to action. Like, I've never, as she gets older, like, and she's my most emotional child by far. Um, so just like being there to help them really develop better emotional well-being than I had as a kid has been like really important. Letting them express.
Well, we've been trying to teach Kaylee how to speak up. When she gets lost in something, she isn't the kind of child that will ask a question. She's not going to raise her hand. She's too embarrassed to not know everything. And I'm like, "Oh, did I give you that phobia? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." You know, I'm like, you just have to, all you have to do is ask me. And she's like, "But you're not my teacher. You didn't go to school to be a teacher." And I'm like, "Well, thanks. I guess I can't teach you then, right?" But, you know, like, but then she'll say, "Well, it's okay. You can try to help me and we'll see." And then eventually she goes to Dan, which makes me really sad. I'm like, why is Dan teaching Kaylee math? I'm the engineer. So that just, but it's funny because she feels more comfortable because he's like, I'm not good at math either.
Yeah, his approach is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
whereas you're like, we're going to find the answer. We're going to get
right. We're going to get there. Look, there's a pattern to this. Don't forget about what your teacher said about, you know, adding and subtracting. There's a pattern. You know, decimals
you're
just
rewriting curriculum.
Right. Like, why don't you learn it the way I learned it when I was a kid? It's so easy.
You math. Yeah, I struggled with second grader math the other day.
That's okay. I was having a hard time trying to decipher some fractional things last year because they were teaching them Common Core, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. I've never done this before.
Yeah,
that's not the way I learned math.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, parents are at a disadvantage with Common Core math, but I think everybody's trying to figure it out. Okay, so two more questions. Oh my God. Okay. I just want to, like, part of this is that, like, we don't get to talk to each other enough, and I feel like we could have like a 2 to 3 hour interview. Like, next time we're really gonna like dig into our childhood experience.
I don't know if I want to do that on a podcast though. That's kind of weird.
I guess we could just like do it over coffee. Have to involve
anyone. Should we just get a bottle?
Well, this is true. This is why that's silly. So you had mentioned before some women that really advised you in the beginning of your career. Have there, and maybe it's them, but like, who has like mentored you? And obviously you're passionate about mentorship, but who's been that person that's like made that impact and really helped pull you along in your career and push you when you needed it too?
Interestingly enough, it was not a woman. It is a gentleman that I met. The first time I met him, he yelled at me because I was late to a meeting. And from then on, like, you know, it was kind of a natural progression into mentorship because he was, you know, probably 20 years my senior in the organization. And he'd seen it all, you know, he'd been to this post and he's done this thing. And, you know, so he would actually take the time to talk to me about the professional side. You know, here's what you need to do to run an office. Here's who you need to talk to. You know, here's how you need to keep people informed. And communication is his big thing. You know, so he's like, you can never go wrong with too much communication. People may be like, why does she keep emailing me? But trust me, if the crap ever hits the fan, you're going to want those emails. And it was amazing to have that kind of, like, it was just no nonsense, like, duh, this is how you're an adult.
Yeah.
Kind of mentorship. And it wasn't, you know, I had strong female mentors, but I saw them far less. And the things we talked about were very personal things, you know, like, you know, eventually you're going to have kids and it's a little awkward having kids and trying to do your job because they seem to think that, you know, when you start having a belly that you suddenly can't do things, like you can't hold a screwdriver, you know, I don't know what happens.
Which, let's be clear, I don't use a tool belt at work, ever. I barely know how to use, I had to buy a toolkit, and I don't know how to use it. But slowly,
you know,
you're teaching me. Like, when I moved, I had to use the Tena packing system. So just you know, I'm teaching things along the way.
Yes. Yeah, so it is, you know, where was I? Oh, I was talking about my mentor. Like, I've kind of gotten to the point where he's senior enough, I don't necessarily feel comfortable asking him for advice anymore. And so I've kind of turned to other people.
Yeah.
And I actually lost one of my dear friends and mentors a couple months ago. And that was a hard thing. Like I'd lost another one about 8 years ago, both of them to cancer, which cancer sucks. It just
Mm-hmm.
does.
Mm-hmm.
And losing two of them, they were fairly young. I mean, these ladies were phenomenal, and they were powerful, strong examples of female leadership. And they were amazing mothers. They were fantastic people all around. They had the ability to walk into a room and put everybody at ease and be effective.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not something you find twice. So I was thrilled when I got a second chance, and then so now I feel like I'm kind of on my own again. But I'm also apparently at the point where I should be the mentor, not the mentee. But I don't think that mentoring stops when you're the senior person either.
Right.
It can't. There's still things I need to learn. I am not a natural leader. Um, I'm a natural second in command kind of person. Like
Yeah.
if I have a strong person in front of me, I will follow that person to the ends of the earth. And everybody else, I just bring them along with me. They're like, oh, but that makes you the best leader because you don't want to be in power. And I'm like, no, really what that makes me is kind of indecisive.
Yeah.
So missing all of that, somebody someday can just say, hey, look, this is how you're a leader. You just make the decisions. You make everybody happy making decisions. I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But I do try to be more of a collaborative type of leader. I don't have a very tyrannical leadership style.
Well, I think that's probably a good thing. I
It
don't.
might be.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
don't.
know there's at least one person in my office who's like, why can't you just tell me what you want me to do? And I'm like, I gave you a list, pick one. They're like, no, you really should just assign things to different people. And I'm like, no, I want you to figure out how to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
I do the same thing with my 15-year-old, my 10-year-old. So I'm just saying it works.
It is. It's leadership is everywhere. I mean, I think
Right?
it is. It's so funny because I'm like, well, I mean, I don't technically have a leadership role. Nobody reports to me or whatever, but we're called to lead in all different parts of our lives, even if we're not aware of it in the moment. I think if you
Right.
look back on a day and think about the things that you've done, I mean, I even think of like, even if you're at a grocery store, the way that you interact with people is important to anybody that's observing you. Like you're either going to lead in that moment in a good way, even if your clerk is horrible,
Yeah.
or you're going to lose it. And you have an opportunity, I think, more than we realize, to really put our best self forward.
For
So
sure.
yeah, I don't know if that made any sense, but it just came to me. I was kind of thinking about leading by example, but that it's always there. It's not
Yeah.
just when our kids are watching. It's always there.
It helps if somebody is watching.
There's some encouragement there to do the right thing.
Right. Right. Oh, I should probably stand a little straighter when my kids are watching me. All right. Yeah. Um, yeah, but leadership is a challenge no matter who you are or where you are in your career.
Mhm.
And finding good examples of leadership is really hard. Um, I read a lot of books written by women on leadership, and I somewhat struggle with it because I'm a little more assertive
Mhm.
than, I'm a little more one of the guys in my actions and the way I present myself. I'm not real, I don't know. I wouldn't even say feminine. I think I would just say I'm just not really what you expect when you come in to an office and I'm like, hey, let's go do this and let's get this done and we got this done. Very direct. I'm very assertive, and it takes people aback. I was told to my face, very sadly, that I was too aggressive for a woman,
Mm.
and I was like, I don't think that's really a fair comment. I'm as aggressive as I have always been.
Yeah.
But I realized what they were saying is that well, and I've been told this a couple of times, is that, women have other skills that they should be using in leadership other than being assertive. And I'm like, wait, what? What kind of leadership advice is that?
Yeah.
I'm an assertive person. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, this is how I think we should do it. And I'm not going to hem and haw, and I'm going to be very direct. And it makes me a terrible diplomat, but makes me a great engineer, right? These are the things that you balance.
Yeah.
I'm never going to win over a boardroom with my probably with my demeanor, but I will with the facts.
Yeah.
And that's what's more important to me. And to be told that, oh, you're so aggressive, I was like, so wait, are women not allowed to be aggressive in the boardroom? Are they not allowed to be aggressive in their lives? I mean, do you tell female rugby players that they can't be aggressive on the field? I'd like to see you try. It's just it was a shocking point, and this was not long ago, and it kind of floored me.
Yeah. With good reason.
Right, and I was like, well, I guess I can try to be nicer. I don't know what that means, but I can try to be nicer.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, just stop pushing your point so much. I'm like, but I'm right. Again, a little bit of my, I need to be right. I need to be perfect. I got to push boundaries, be the master of everything. So, part of it is my personal hangups that I have to be the right. And you know that very well because I used to do this all the time when we were kids. No, I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
No, the rule is this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I feel like my perfectionism just shows up differently, but I think it's so hard to like, it's a security blanket.
it is.
Perfectionism is like something that I have clung to, like, and it's an insecurity, and it's like it's comfortable letting
Yeah.
that go. When I can let it go, I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like. But then 5 minutes later, I'm trying to
Right.
control the universe again. So,
So I think quilting has taught me that perfectionism isn't the only thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
No quilt ever comes out perfect. I don't care how much I line things up and I draw lines and I sew. What?
I think the ones that you've given my kids look perfect.
But I will look at them and be like, I see the flaws every single time.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to accept that I did it with love. I did it for my nieces and my nephews. I did not do it to be perfect. I did it because I love.
Mm-hmm.
And letting go of the perfectionism, because I mean, you'd never get a quilt from me if I was gonna go be perfect about it. It would just never happen. And it's freeing to kind of go, you know what? They're gonna love it. It's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
then to see them dragging around the house was, I'm like, yes, I win. It's awesome. So,
Yes. Yeah. Well, you have so many talents. I have none of those talents, but I'm looking forward to like finding whatever my talent might be. I'll
I'll
figure
send you
it
some
out.
crochet hooks. You can start that.
A what?
I can send you some crochet hooks, and you can start with that.
Oh no. No. Yeah, I do know how to crochet. I just like get 3/4 of, I have a lot of 3/4 done scarves. I don't know what this says about me.
Um, you could probably analyze it and come up with something like follow through.
Dang it, let's not analyze that. Let's not do that. Okay. So we're gonna roll to the final question. Oh my gosh. Ah, I'm so excited because this is
Uh-oh.
not that this is like a tell about anybody. I love this question. But if you got to play DJ for 5 minutes, you get to choose any song. What song are you gonna pick?
What's my favorite song to dance to?
This reminds me of all the dance offs we used to have in the basement. Oh my god. We were so cool.
We were. We had that and we had comedy night.
Um,
I think I'd be happy. I love that song. I love dancing to that song.
oh my gosh, I had a guest that just mentioned that song.
I love it. It makes me feel like anything's possible again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also love Pharrell Williams, but that's just me.
No, I think I love it. I think it's a good choice. I fully support your choice, and also there is no wrong answer. So you could have chosen anything under the sun, but I do be happy, and I do it's from a soundtrack, right? So we've played it
Despicable
frequently.
Me, right? Yeah.
What movie?
Wasn't it Despicable Me?
Yes, I do think it's from Despicable Me. But yeah, there's also a Portugal the Man song that's from Despicable Me.
Ah, yes.
So I do kind of dig the Despicable Me soundtrack. I'm all about it.
It
So
is kind of fun.
Yes. Well, this has been so, so, so much fun. I've learned so much. Now I realize how much we have in common, which it
Which is
was
weirder than
easy as kids to like think about how different we are. Your cat is like, are you done yet?
no, he is like, dude, I'm in charge. I need to photobomb you.
So
He's not
I'm
coming in here.
waiting for him to just walk
No,
through.
no, he's locked outside the room. He's not coming in.
Oh, poor baby. But no, this is I'm incredibly grateful that you would do this. And I have like I love you. I'm never going to be able to describe how much I truly admire like just how smart you are, the things that you've achieved, the drive that you have, even though sometimes I know it probably gets a little out of balance. Um,
For sure.
you are one of the most considerate people on the planet, and I don't know that I've always done a good job of giving you credit for that and thanking you for that. But if there's anybody that's ever trying to get the family all pulled back together again, it's always you. It always has been. I have a feeling that it always will be. There
Oldest
are
sons.
yeah, there are probably times that we would not have been together had you not been the one pushing us all saying we're going to find 3 days to make this work. And
Right.
I think a lot of the fact that our family has been able to heal and repair from some of the things that we've been through is because you have been that constant person making sure that we were coming back together. And so I love you
He's sweet.
and I miss you, and I cannot wait. Hopefully, get to see you in late 2020, early 2021. But until then, we have Zoom.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I love you.
It's a pleasure being on here with you.
Mwah!